Pujya Swamiji spoke on New Year's Eve of the divine experience when he received his Guru's touch. You have also spoken of divine experiences during meditation. What is this like? Are you able to explain the feeling or experience? Also, is it possible for anyone to have a divine experience in this way, or are only some blessed to receive this? Okay, well, I knew who asked the other one. I don't know who asked this one. But first of all, everyone is able to have these experiences. But you have to be open. And a lot of times we think we're open, but we really actually have a very, very specific way in our mind that those divine experiences are going to come, what it's going to be like. And so we're open in that way at that time to that experience. But we're not open to it in a general sense. There's a beautiful story actually of a man who is a beautiful devotee of God, really a devoted man. And he was coming home one night, cold winter night, like tonight. And on his way, there was a beggar. And the beggar said to him, "Would you give me your shawl? I'm so cold." And the man wanted to help the beggar, but of course he also was cold. And so he was in a fix about what to do. And he took his shawl and he cut it in half. And he gave half the shawl to the beggar and he kept half for himself. And that night he had a dream. And in his dream, he saw God. And I've heard the story told both where God is there in the form of Jesus Christ, and I've heard the story told with God being in the form of Krishna. I'm sure you could tell it with God being in the form of innumerable other forms on earth. And the divine was wearing half a shawl. And first of all, the man was so ecstatic to have the darshan of God in his dream. Oh my God, he'd always wanted this. But then he noticed that God was wearing only half a shawl. And he said, "Well, why are you only wearing half a shawl?" And the divine said to him, "Well, that's all you gave me." And the story has many possible morals depending on what you're trying to teach. But in this instance, the teaching is about openness. And so in our places of worship, in our mandirs, in our churches, in our synagogues, in our mosques, in our gurdwaras, in our meditation room, on the banks of Ganga, we're very open. Perhaps if he had had an image of the divine in his place of worship, he would have immediately recognized it. But what happens when we're in our quote-unquote regular life is we're not quite so open. And so if you look back over history at people who have had divine experiences, yes, some of them took place in places of worship. But a lot of them took place in other places. My first experience, the one that changed my life, took place on the banks of Ganga. But I didn't know Ganga was holy. I was going down to just put my feet in the river and cool off and freshen up after a long, hot, sweaty trip from Delhi. I had no idea the river was holy. And so, like the man who didn't recognize God on the street, dressed as the beggar, in order to be able to have these experiences, we have to really be open all the time. And so, yeah, anybody can have the experience. And the reason I know that is because it happened to me. And so it's, we may think, oh, well, you have to be a dedicated meditator. You have to be a very sincere spiritual seeker. You have to be, I wasn't. I wasn't a meditator at all. Forget being a dedicated meditator. I had never meditated. What did you see? What did you feel? You'd think within 21 years I would have figured out a way to put words on it. And yet I haven't. And the closest that I've come to be able to explain it verbally of what I saw in that moment was literally, I was staring out at Ganga, and it was literally an image of the divine that came to me in the form of this divine river. Now, it wasn't the image that I would later see of, Ganga. I mean, it wasn't that goddess. She wasn't sitting on an alligator. It wasn't anything like that. It also wasn't the image that in the Judeo-Christian tradition in which I was raised that we're taught when you think about God as sort of this, old man in some ways. I don't even know where that image comes to us. It certainly is not anything written in the scriptures. But if you talk to most people about their image of what God would look like, it's always this sort of old man. And it wasn't like that either. But it was a very, very clear image of divinity. That all of that in my visual field, all of the light, all of the form, all of everything came together to be. But what then happened was, as I moved my head, my visual field, what I realized was my visual field split into foreground and background. And the easiest way to explain this is, if you got a speck in your eye, if you got a piece of dust in your eye, or if you wear contact lenses and you got something on the contact lens, or if you wear glasses and there were a spot on your glasses, as you moved your face, the foreground, being that spot, would stay the same. Right? The spot would stay with you even as you move your head. Background changes, but that spot stays there, right? Because it's in your eye or on your contact lens. And for me, that was what happened with this image of the divine, was it began on Ganga. But then as I moved my head and saw pillars and steps and people and buildings, the background changed. But the foreground stayed the same. And so whatever I was looking at, whomever I was looking at, it was seeing God in them everywhere. And that's as close as I can come verbally to explain what it was like. But I think what's more important than what it looked like is what the experience inside is, because I've read a lot of different experiences of a lot of different people having experiences of God, and they're never the same. And so I think what's really important is that we not have any concept of, oh, this is what happens, this is what it's like. In all of the people I know who have had divine experiences and all of the ones I've read about, they're all unique. They're all different. They're all individual. And so, but the experience, the inner experience, tends to share a very similar quality, which is a oneness with everything. That suddenly all of the borders between where we think we end and the world begins, that those disappear. And that everything starts to just become part of one beautiful, sort of constantly merging and changing tapestry of shape, of color, of energy, of which we are part. And so the consistent piece of the experience is almost always an experience of the transitory nature of form. And so you lose an attachment to form because in that moment you have an experience of form no longer being there anyway, and sort of the visual illusion of form. And a deep felt sense, awareness and experience of being an integral part of it all. And so the form and the energy of the universe being a part of yours and sort of merging and melting into all of this. If you think about what waves look like on an ocean, that would give you a good way to understand it. I mean, that's not for me what it looked like visually, but that would give you a way to understand it is if you watch the ocean long enough, you see waves and they come and they go and they come and they go and they come and they go. And if you were to do an open-eyed meditation on the ocean in such a way that your entire visual field included only the ocean, not like the hotel on the beach up there and, the kids playing down here, but just the ocean. In a while, what you'd see form, content. You'd see the water sort of becoming form, coming back into itself, becoming form, coming back into itself, how sort of all of it really was just ocean. And that experience, although not always visually, but internally felt sense, is something that does seem to be pretty consistent between all of the experiences of divinity. And this is what all of the sages and the rishis tell us over and over and over again. In all of the mantras, in all of the teachings, the world is divine. This is what the Upanishads tell us, right? When we read the first mantra of the Aishupanishad and it says, Isha vasimidam sarvam, yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Well, the whole universe is pervaded by the divine, right? We chant this. The whole universe is pervaded by the divine. There's nothing, no one that is not pervaded by the divine. So it only makes sense that when you have a connection with the divine in any way, that you're going to experience the same things that we're told about. I mean, clearly the rishis had experienced it. They weren't studying it somewhere, they experienced it. And then they wrote what they experienced. And the truth is, when you go to the mystics of all religions, those who actually were writing about their own mystical experiences, not just those who were, regurgitating things that they had heard somebody else say, but those who really were diving into their own meditative practices, they tell us the same thing. Different languages, different ways, but the teachings are all the same. It's all one. It's all God. Get far enough back from the tapestry and you're able to see that it's all perfect and beautiful. And yet, we are a crucial part of it, which means that we have to play our part. And that's where that interesting and beautiful spiritual paradox comes in of, yes, it's all perfect. Yes, it's all God. And yes, we must act. Yes, we must do our part. Yes, we must step up to the plate and fulfill our duty. Which really seems like a paradox. If it's all God and it's all perfect, well then why we have to step up to the plate? Why do we have to do our duty? Who cares? I mean, why does anybody even have a duty if it's all already perfect? And when you have that experience of being such an integral part of the whole, that's what resolves the paradox, because suddenly it isn't a paradox. Suddenly it's not God's over here who's made everything perfect and I'm over here, and so why do I have to do anything? When you have that experience of being one with the universe, however it comes to you, in whatever form, whether in meditation, whether in prayer, whether lying down and watching the stars, whether watching a sunset. I mean, there's as many different ways for that experience to happen as there are people who have already had that experience. But when you have the experience, what you recognize is that part of that perfection is you and your role. It's like the tapestry is perfect, so who cares if we remove the thread? Well, the perfection of the tapestry requires the threads to all be in place. And only if I'm thinking I'm not a thread would I not have to fulfill my role? Would somehow my actions not be part of the perfection of the universe? But when you recognize how integral all of us are as threads of this tapestry, then yes, it's all perfect. Yes, it's all God. And yes, my thread is crucial. And if it were de-threaded from the tapestry, the entire thing would unravel. That what is perfection is made up of all of these individual threads, of which I am one, when I'm feeling separate, and of which I am all when I'm in an experience of connection.